Nintendo Switch. Let me show you what's going on. So the customer accidentally damaged their JoyCon connector, and that's going to be our job to replace that today. Hopefully that will be the only problem, but we'll test for everything else just to make sure, so we don't send them back a non-working switch. Our first order of business will be to pull off a donor so that we can replace our connector. This video is brought to you by PCB. We'll talk about their awesome services in a little bit. For your orientation purposes, this is where we'll be working on both boards, the donor and the customer board. In order to remove our donor connector, I must set up my equipment, and while I set up my equipment, I'll throw up my expected temperatures for this job. These temperatures are brought to you by the Amazon associate links in the description. If you go to my video description and click on one of these links and buy any of this equipment, a small portion of that purchase will go to supporting the channel. And I greatly appreciate you. It won't cost you an extra dime. We're going to remove this connector by heating from below. If we heat it from above, we would end up melting the lid and probably the connector entirely. They're kind of snowflakes. I know some folks get worried about blowing parts off the board off the other side, but as long as you don't nudge or bump the board, the parts will stay in place just fine. There we go. Nice clean pull. More important on their board than this one. Let's pull their mangled connector. So there's a new one on. It's pretty close. Just gotta get it close enough to where the surface tension will kind of suck it into place. We're flowing now. And she kind of just fit right into place there. Excellent. Let it dry. Opening the lid. Have a look and make sure everything's soldered into place nicely. This side looks excellent, and this side looks excellent. Next job will be to clean this thoroughly, and then we'll go ahead and run it through the power test, our normal power test, just to make sure everything is functional, and go from there. Let's run everything through our normal testing. First test I'll perform is with my 3.5mm to USB-C cable, which is hooked to my benchtop PSU. And what we want to see here is just recognition on both sides of the port. This is sometimes reliable, sometimes not, but let's see what it does. And that's a big fat nothing. Not what we want to be seeing here. Do we have other issues? Oh, there we go. Now we're getting recognition. That was strange. Try the other side again. Yeah, very weird. Getting recognition in one direction. Try our more reliable test. Activate with the OEM. I'm feeling like we definitely have other problems. So I broke rule number 1, which was look at the port. And as you can see, we have a few problems in there. Those two last pins are bent out. Unfortunately, I just don't think this port is going to be viable. I'm going to have to contact the customer and let them know. This is the nice thing about recording videos. You have proof. I have an announcement. I, being Mage Repair, am moving back home to Texas. My primary service area in Texas will be North Richland Hills, Hurst, Euless, Bedford, and Fort Worth in general. All mail-in services will be temporarily paused through the month of August and will resume sometime in September when I've worked out all the logistics. If you're a local shop in those areas and need micro-soldering services, please reach out. Talk to y'all from Texas in September. We've gotten permission to proceed with the port repair. For your orientation purposes, we'll be working on this side of the board to begin with, and then we'll be flipping over and we'll be working here. First things first, add some flux. We're going to flood these anchors with low melt. It will aid in the removal of the ports, and it will aid in the cleanup. This is really only applicable if you're not using a hot swap method. I don't do the hot swaps. It's a completely legitimate method. It's just not one I'm comfortable with. Do what works for you. And we'll drain the sauce. Once everything has wetted, we'll concentrate in on the anchors first. Once they have wetted, focus in on where the pins are at. And once they have wetted, the port will drop. There we go. Appears to be a clean pull, but let's take a look at the other side. Yeah, that pulled nicely. There was just some gunk under the port. We flipped the board to side B, and we'll begin cleanup. Will be greatly aided by the low melt we applied earlier. When wicking these pads, you want to go with the pads and just glide across. Shouldn't be putting any more pressure than what's necessary to keep the wick on the board nice and clean. Placing a ball of solder on our tip. We're just going to glide that ball over our pads. Not really trying to make any contact with the pads and the iron. Sexy. Same concept on the port. Excellent. And we'll use our usual method of bringing up the temperature of the board enough to wet the solder. Press down until you see evidence of it drying. Feels very solid. Good. Let's check our external pins. Sometimes when you're concentrating on getting this row down, which is the important part, you can neglect these a bit, but they look real good visually, and they are solid. Place a ball of solder on your tip, Get things started. You want good feed through to the other side. And rub it in a little bit. That is excellent feed through. Next step will be to clean off the board thoroughly, clean out the port thoroughly, and we'll come back and make sure it's powering normally. Now let's see if everything works as we want it to. Okay, that looks normal. And that looks normal. Okay, as always, that is the least reliable test. I just want to see some behavior on both sides. Now let's test with our modified iPhone Power Squid. And we'll activate using the OEM just quickly. What we want to see here is a steady climb in amperage with no hangups. It looks to be what we're getting. Let's see if we're docking. If we're docking, the port is fine. If we're not, we have other issues. Sometimes you have to try both sides. Not always immediately responsive. Okay, and we're docking. Excellent. Next step will be to put it back in the housing, and then we also need to test and make sure our JoyCon connector is working correctly as well. So we'll put it back in the housing, we'll test with our JoyCons once it's charged its battery, and go from there. We're back up and running on its battery. We're fast charging at 15 volts. That's good. Let's hook up our JoyCons. Make sure it recognizes both. Recognizing both. Charging both. We're definitely fast charging. Both of our JoyCons are working, which means our JoyCon connector replacement went fine. We're charging correctly, which means our port replacement went fine. Excellent. If you got value out of this video, I think you get value out of this one, and I'll see you there.